Thank you so much. Our next speaker, we're very honored to have Dr. Sherry Shipley to talk about education.
Am I on? Thanks for sticking around. We're going to go through a few things. This is a really big topic, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on early childhood education, even though it's very near and dear to my heart, or higher ed. We're really going to focus on K12 today. Education policy 1 year later. So I thought we'd start with a couple quotes from our dear president. Our schools aren't safe, which is bad enough. On top of that, our kids aren't learning. Too many are dropping out of school and into the street life, and too many of those who do graduate are getting diplomas that have been devalued into certificates of attendance by a dumbed-down curriculum that asks little of teachers and less of students. Schools are crime-ridden, and they don't teach. Well, I know some schools around here. I know a lot of teachers, and that's not true. As president, I will establish the national goal of providing school choice. That's a dirty word. To every American child living in poverty. If we can put a man on the moon, dig out the Panama Canal, and win 2 world wars, and I have no doubt we as a nation can provide school choice to every disadvantaged child in America. So, pre-K to postdoc, what's going on? Not a lot of action at the national level in terms of early childhood education, although with the shutdown, if it continues more than a week, there will be an impact on Head Start funding. So that is something to watch, that parents that send their children to Head Start schools may not have that opportunity. And it does continue to improve at the state level with the expansion of On My Way Pre-K. We're very rich in this area to have lots of choices for preschool education. That is not true throughout the state of Indiana, where there are many preschool deserts, where there are no preschools for even the On My Way Pre-K dollars to go because they don't meet that level. We're going to focus on K12 today, but in terms of higher education, what has happened in the past year, well, we know. We've seen it on Purdue's campus. We've seen it in this community, the increase of hateful incidences, hate speech, hate pamphlets, and continued cuts to grants, work-study funds at the NSF, the EPA, NOAA, NIH, and the State Department, which impacts research, low-income students, exchange programs, and research centers. So, at the K-12 level, it's all about the rollback of the federal footprint. So what's on the chopping block at the K through 12 level? Well, one of the first things that we've seen is protection for transgender students. As you know, President Obama put in place policies to protect transgender students, giving them protection even if their school districts did not want to do that. We are seeing Betsy DeVos and President Trump roll that back. Also on the chopping block are student loan forgiveness for teachers, and people that are going into human services areas and giving back to their community, where before they could get more student loan forgiveness. We will see less people going into these areas if they know their student loans won't be forgiven. We also see on the chopping block strict rules for identifying whether districts have racial and ethnic disparities in special education and discipline policies. And this is really important, especially if we look at the number of minority children that have out-of-school suspensions, in-school suspension, those types of things. So President Obama put in place policies where school districts had to account for those numbers. And were minority students disproportionately being put into special education classes, or were they disproportionately being suspended in school and out of school? And those regulations, again, on the chopping block. And we've seen congressional support. They have been complicit in all of this. So removing ESSA, which is Every Student Succeeds Act regulations, and removing teacher preparation regulations. So what is ESSA, the Every Student Succeed Act? So we went from No Child Left Behind to ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. And under that, every state must complete an implementation plan and have it approved by the DOE. So as this writing, 15 states have had their plans approved. I believe Indiana has submitted theirs, but we'll talk about our new changes in our diplomas and graduation levels and how that's going to be impacted. What we've seen is Secretary DeVos has approved plans even if these states did not make the required changes. So we're almost seeing a rubber stamp at that level and really no accountability on what's happening. Budget implications from President Trump, and we don't know where this is all going to land, but some of the things that we've seen, proposed huge slash of $9.2 billion to the Department of Education. So we know that will be cut. And that really puts programs like Title II at risk. Title II billions that trains teachers and reduces class sizes. And I can tell you in this community, and all over Indiana, there's a crisis, a teacher shortage crisis. My friend works at a middle school here in the community. They lost an English teacher a couple weeks before school started. They didn't even bother looking because they knew they wouldn't be able to find anybody. They just put more kids in the other classes. And something else that we're watching to see if it's going to be cut is career and tech ed. There's a bill pending in the House to end teacher loan forgiveness for those teaching in those high-need areas, particularly in STEM and tech ed. School choice, it's our biggest battle. And again, this is really a misnomer. And I love that, some of the acronyms and things that Republicans come up with. They're very creative writers. School choice is the terminology used to send public money to private schools for tuition. Period, end of story. That's what school choice is. It continues to be a top priority for the Trump White House, the Freedom Caucus, many members of the legislators, and really Secretary DeVos is going to push and continue school choice, really any means possible. One of the things we've seen under the new tax code, 529 plans, where families used to be able to put money into a 529 plan, tax-free, to save money for college. Under the new tax plan, you can now use 529 plans for K12 private school tuition. Is there equity in vouchers? There's absolutely not equity in vouchers. Voucher schools create their own admissions policies, which means all this public money going to private schools, they can set academic standards, they can set behavioral standards, disability standards. So what people don't realize also, when you take all this money out of the public schools, you also take those families that are doing the PTA and they're getting involved and they're running carnivals and they're helping coach and that type of thing. You also take all those involved families out of your community school along with that public school money. And studies continue to find that student achievement does not increase in public schools. So the school choice that is really giving students a leg up is not true. There's just no finding that. This just shows a chart of vouchers in Indiana, where we are. $146.1 million. And you can see the steep incline that it continues, and there's no sign of it stopping. So this is really something we have to get involved with at the federal level and the state level as well. So what to watch for? Pending legislation right now, and I saw Sheila walk in, so maybe she can give us a little update or where that is. HB 1315, which is to strip power from elected official school boards. We're watching this very closely, and a limit on how often they can meet, which will allow state officials to come in and, again, take over schools. No real indication of how that's going to be used. No clear understanding of this transition where a school may be put on a watch list because of financial hardship or something like that to they have been taken over. Sheila, did I adequately describe that? Which doesn't exactly have a stellar record on managing their voucher schools.
They are. Bob Marr, that used to work for Sue Ellen Reed in the Department of Education, is closing charter schools. He closed our charter school here in Lafayette because we weren't making it, and we owed lots of money. So they are becoming more responsive to different things that are happening that are negative. Ball State taking over probably is a good thing, but the fact that superintendents and school boards would be fired
Not a good thing to lose local control.
Testified, the Superintendent's Association, School Boards Association, both testified against that, Sherry.
Right.
So I don't think that will stay in 1350.
Good, good. Thank you for that. What are some other things to watch for that are really going to impact our schools, our students, our classrooms, and our teachers? Entitlement reform. Cuts to Medicaid will have a real impact on schools and school districts. Schools get about $4 billion a year from Medicaid for services. If this is cut, you will see school nurses cut, which incidentally, we've also seen some changes in healthcare policy that says healthcare officials will be allowed to refuse to treat someone on religious basis. So does that mean if a transgender student comes to a school nurse, that school nurse can refuse to treat that student? So that's a problem. Speech, physical, occupational therapists are in our schools. Those funds could be cut. Other personnel, including aides for special needs students and medical equipment that is in our schools saving students every day. So those are some other impacts that we could have. Another thing that we really need to be watching, particularly here in Indiana, are the new Indiana high school graduation pathways. This will impact this year's 7th graders. So 7th graders are the class of 2023. They now will be required to make 3 different pathways of criteria. They have to get a high school diploma, which that's also in flux. If you read the paper the past couple days on what a high school diploma, what those requirements will actually be. They also have to demonstrate employability skills through some project, service-based learning, or work-based learning experience. And the third pathway they're going to have to complete is post-secondary competencies in either an honors diploma, a certain benchmark score on a standardized test, a certificate, or 2 classes of some type of CTE, career and tech ed concentration, or AP classes and that type of thing.
Indiana's asked for a waiver on some of the stipulations for ESSA. The general diploma was not going to be now,
Right.
and that will take us from 89% graduation down to 73%.
Right. So we're going. So with the new, we will further disenfranchise more young people coming out of high school because they will not get a high school diploma. So it's really concerning. So we really need to be on our state leaders because they have got to help fund these new requirements. For one thing, they've got to have more guidance counselors in the schools. Guidance counselors can't do everything they have to do now. And if somebody has to manage whether a student did a service-based learning project, were they career ready, did they go out and do these certain apprenticeships or job shadowing or those types of things. Those take people, those take money to track those. So we have got to make sure that our state government funds our schools to impact these new legislation so they're not more unfunded mandates for our public schools. So, call to action. Indiana voters really care about education issues. And whether they are red, purple, or blue, they will vote for pro-education candidates. Glenda Ritz, okay, is Exhibit A on that. So galvanize voters under education issues. Continue to speak up for a publicly well-educated society. Being educated is not a bad thing, but sometimes that seems to be the narrative. So continue to do that. And your voice matters. When the tax bill was being discussed, one of the things that was in it was they were going to tax graduate student stipends. And if any of you have been graduate students or are grad students, you know you barely make it at that point in your life anyway. There was a huge uproar, lots of pushback on that. That didn't make it in. So your voice, your calls, your letters, they do have an impact. They make a difference. Stay connected at the state and local level where where many education funding and policy issues take place. Subscribe to the Indianapolis Star in your local newspaper. Indianapolis Star is doing some really good reporting on education issues, and they really keep our people honest. So there's no such thing as free media, folks. You have to pay, and you need to subscribe and support your local media. We need to watch the new education requirements, teacher training and pay, and that we don't continue to expand voucher programs. We need to make sure that we value experiences over high-stakes testing, so supporting the arts, supporting athletics, supporting shops and maker spaces in our schools, and respect our educators. Take out test scores of teacher evaluations, and a couple places you can go to support local educators or educators is ichoosepublicschools.org or ISTA.in.org. So that's it. Stay informed, stay woke. Thank you very much.